Stay with me. We have to keep moving.
I can't store.
Yes, you can. Hold on.
The rain had no mercy that night. It came down cold and deliberate, not falling so much as hunting, finding the gap between your collar and your skin, the exact place where you were already tired and making it worse. Tony walked with his head down and his hands loose at his sides, 3 blocks from his cab, shoes letting in water at the left heel, thinking about nothing, because nothing was all he had left to think about. He did not see her coming. She came from the shadows beside a shuttered pharmacy. One moment the doorway was empty, the next it wasn't. A young woman, well-dressed, wrong neighborhood. Her legs buckled mid-step like something inside her had simply switched off. She pitched forward with nothing between her and the wet concrete and Tony's arms. He didn't decide. His body moved before his mind formed a single word. 1 step left, arms up, and she was against his chest, her full weight, sudden and total. Her breath came in shallow, broken pulls. Her fingers seized his jacket like he was the last solid thing in a world that had been coming apart beneath her for some time. He stood there. The street was completely empty. No witnesses, no sound except the rain and her breathing. His hands were not in his pockets. She did not hit the ground, and the traffic camera above them recorded every second of it, storing his face, his jacket, his plate number, transmitting it to a network he did not know existed, operated by a man he had never heard of. Tony walked into that hospital thinking he had done something good. He had. He had also just made himself impossible to ignore. Quick pause before we go further. I tell stories about ordinary people who do extraordinary things when nobody is watching. If that means something to you, subscribe. The next story is already waiting. Now back to Tony. He had been a good student once. That is the part nobody sees when they look at a man driving a cab at midnight in the rain. They see the jacket with the frayed cuff. They see the kind of tired that sleep cannot touch. They do not see the boy who sat in the front row, scored highest in his district, and stood in a school corridor holding his results with shaking hands, certain, absolutely certain, that the door was finally going to open. The door did not open. No scholarship, no connection, no family friend with a word in the right ear, just his mother Gloria standing in their small kitchen reading the letter over his shoulder, and the particular silence of a woman who has learned to absorb hard news without making it worse by giving it a name.
She put her hand on his back. She said, "We'll find another way." She said it the way people say things when they don't yet know what the other way is, but have already decided in advance to survive it. Tony was 18. He believed her. He was 31 now. 14 months on a loading dock until the company relocated without warning. 3 years of data entry, punctual, never sick, never late, until the afternoon they handed him a box for his desk and a handshake from a manager who couldn't meet his eyes. $212 in a bank account that knew his landlord's name better than it knew his own. A cab with a cracked dashboard and a left rear tire permanently soft. A mother, 61 years old, 2 jobs, never resting, who responded to every money transfer with the same 4 words. "Don't worry, you eat." He never told her how often he didn't. Tonight had been a confirmation. 4 rides in 9 hours. One fare walked without paying. Another dropped loose coins into his palm like he was a vending machine. His fuel light blinked on at 11, and he sat at the wheel doing real arithmetic in his head, whether he could make it home or whether he needed to swallow one more quiet loss. He made it, barely. He signed off, started walking, and let his landlord's 2 missed calls sit unanswered in his pocket. He had nothing new to say. The city moved around him, neon bleeding into wet asphalt, a distant siren, a couple arguing behind a lit window 3 floors up. Nobody looked down. Nobody ever did.
I stopped expecting things to get better, he thought, stepping over a puddle that had swallowed half the curb. I just started getting better at surviving them. He didn't know yet that that thought was the last one he would ever think as the man he used to be. She came from the doorway of the shuttered pharmacy, one hand dragging against the wall, one heel snapped clean off, hair fallen across her face, legs already surrendering. Young, expensive coat, completely wrong street, completely wrong hour. She was going down, fast, hard, alone. Tony moved, not from courage, not from calculation, from something older and faster than either, the same reflex that grabs a glass before it falls, that reaches for a child at a curb. 2 steps, and she collapsed into him, all her weight, all at once, her hands clutching his jacket, her whole body shaken. "Hey," he said. The voice came out low and steady, surprising even him. "Hey, I've got you." She made a sound against his shoulder, not a word, something smaller, the sound of someone who has been holding on alone for a very long time and has found, at the final possible second, something solid enough to let go. He didn't know that 2 blocks away a black car had been circling this neighborhood for 6 hours searching for her. He didn't know the camera above had already transmitted his face to a private security network. He didn't know that by morning his name would be in the mouth of the most dangerous man in the city. He knew one thing. He lifted her, and he ran. The emergency room swallowed them whole. Fluorescent light, the sharp smell of antiseptic cutting through the rain still soaked into Tony's clothes. A nurse met him at the sliding doors, took one look at the woman in his arms and stopped asking questions, started moving. They lifted Susan onto a gurney, and the wheels were already rolling before Tony had finished his first sentence. Then they were gone, through the double doors, and the doors swung shut behind them like something closing permanently. Tony stood at the entrance of the waiting area, dripping onto the linoleum, chest heaving, hands suddenly empty. A receptionist was looking at him. "Are you family?" "No." "Do you know her name?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "No," he said. There was a deposit required before treatment could be authorized. Tony looked at the number, opened his banking app, stood there doing the same arithmetic he had been doing all night, except this time there was no option that ended with him going home. He paid it, every cent he had. Then he found the nearest plastic chair, sat down in his wet clothes, and did not move. The hours passed the way hospital hours do, slowly and all at once. Doctors appeared and disappeared behind the double doors without looking at him. A security guard drifted past twice, clocking him each time. Around 2 in the morning, a different nurse came out and asked again if he was family. Tony gave her the same answer he had given everyone else. "No, but I'm staying." His phone battery died at 4. He had no charger. Now he couldn't call for help even if he needed to. Completely cut off. No contacts, no maps, no way to know if anyone was looking for her. No way to know if someone dangerous already was. Just him, the chair, and the double doors. Dawn came in quietly through the windows above the entrance. The waiting room had emptied and refilled twice over. Tony had not moved. A nurse appeared beside him, young, steady eyes, holding 2 cups. She set one down on the chair beside him without asking, and sat for a moment. "Not many people would stay for a stranger," she said quietly. Tony looked down at his hands, still faintly trembling, still carrying the muscle memory of her weight. "She fell into them," he said. "Felt like a reason." The nurse said nothing, just nodded once, slowly, the way people nod when a thing has been said that cannot be improved upon. She left him with the tea. He was still holding it, still warm, when the double doors finally opened. He found Susan in a bed by the window, morning light crossing the floor toward her. She turned her head when she heard his footsteps. Her eyes, still heavy, still searching, found his face. She stared at him for a long moment. "You're still here," she whispered. Tony sat down in the chair beside her bed, still in his work clothes, still unshaven. "Didn't have anywhere more important to be," he said. Something moved behind her eyes, something that wasn't just gratitude and wasn't just relief. She looked away toward the window before he could read it fully. He didn't notice her hand move beneath the blanket, closing slowly around a phone. 3 words sent to a number she knew better than her own heartbeat. "I've been found." She told him her name was Susan. That was all she offered, and Tony didn't push for more. He had learned long ago that people give you what they're ready to give you. So he accepted Susan. She accepted Tony. For 2 days, that was enough. She was a fast healer, or maybe she was just determined, which Tony was beginning to suspect was more her nature than any accident of biology. She asked about the cab, about his mother. He told her about Gloria in the same simple way he told her everything, without performance, without editing, just the facts of a life laid out plainly. She listened with her whole face. In return, she gave him almost nothing about herself. Fragments, careful architecture, the impression of honesty while keeping the doors locked. He didn't call her on it. He should have. His phone had been charging at the nurse's station when he went to collect it on the 3rd morning. He was halfway down the corridor, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, when the news alert landed. He almost kept walking. The headline stopped him cold. "Walsh heiress missing. Raymond Walsh offers reward as search enters 3rd day." Below it, a photograph. Susan. He stood in the corridor and read the article twice. His coffee went cold in his hand. Then he walked back to her room. She was by the window when he came in. She turned. Whatever she saw in his face made her go very still. He held up the phone. She looked at the screen. She looked at him. She didn't speak. Tony turned and walked back out into the corridor. He found the wall and put his back against it and stood there with his eyes closed, breathing slowly. She found him there 30 seconds later. They stood side by side, not looking at each other. "You knew," he said. Not an accusation, a question. "Yes," she said quietly. The word landed between them like something fragile. "I needed someone who didn't," she said. Tony absorbed that, turned it over, thought about the way she had listened when he talked about Gloria, the way she had asked about the cab like it genuinely mattered. "My car needs a new alternator," he said. "I've got $40 in my account." She almost laughed. "I know," she said softly. "That's exactly why I told you nothing."
He was still deciding what stepping forward might cost him when the sound came from the far end of the corridor. The particular sound of expensive shoes moving with urgent precision on linoleum. The doors opened and the hallway changed. 3 black SUVs visible through the far window. 4 suited men already inside, moving with the contained efficiency of people who did not need to raise their voices to make a room understand who was in charge. Behind him, filling the doorway with the particular gravity of a man who owned the air in whatever room he entered, Raymond Walsh. Tony had seen that face on buildings, on news screens. In person, he was both exactly what Tony expected and something more, something harder and more frightened beneath the control. The fear of a man who had spent 3 days not knowing where his daughter was and had not slept once. Susan moved toward her father. She was almost to him when she turned back. Her hand found Tony's, just for a second, just long enough. Her fingers pressed his once, quickly, and then released. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. But as the suits closed in and the hallway became something Tony had no place inside, one man peeled away and came to stand directly in front of him. "Mr. Walsh would like your full name and contact details," the man said, "for the purposes of a formal statement." "Statement about what?" Tony said. The man's expression didn't change. "About the circumstances," he said carefully, "of how you came to be alone with his daughter." And for the first time since the rain, Tony understood something he had not been prepared for. Being poor and innocent had never been the same thing as being safe. In this city, in this hallway, standing in yesterday's clothes with rain still in the creases, he was not a good man who had done a kind thing. He was an unknown man who had been alone with a billionaire's daughter. The difference between those two things was enormous and entirely out of his hands. The letter arrived the next morning. Cream envelope, heavy paper, hand-delivered by the same suited man from the hospital corridor. Tony turned it over at his kitchen table, his coffee going cold beside it. 3 sentences, a time, an address, a signature, Raymond Walsh. The gates of the estate opened before he reached them. Someone had been watching the road.
Walsh was at the window when Tony entered, hands clasped behind his back. He turned. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Walsh looked at him the way Tony imagined he looked at everything, thoroughly, quietly, without hurry. Then he gestured to a chair. Tony sat. Walsh remained standing. "I want to compensate you," Walsh said. No preamble, no warmth, just the flat efficiency of a man who solved problems with the nearest available tool. "No," Tony said. Walsh stopped. The word had come out calm, not defiant, not performative, just no, clean and simple as a closed door. The offer became larger. Tony declined again. Something shifted in Walsh's expression, not anger, something more unsettling, genuine uncertainty. A man who had not encountered this particular problem in a very long time. A man who didn't want anything from him. "Then what do you want?" Walsh asked. The question came out differently, quieter, stripped of machinery, an actual question. Tony was silent for a moment. "Nothing from you, sir," he said. "I just want to know she's okay." The study went very quiet. Walsh looked at him, really looked, past the frayed cuff and the tired eyes, looking for what was underneath. "She's okay," Walsh said. "Then I'll get out of your way." Inside the estate, Walsh had already turned to his assistant. "Find out everything about that driver," he said quietly. "Everything." The assistant reached for his phone. "Should I contact our legal?" "No," Walsh said. He was still looking at the chair Tony had sat in, not as a threat, as the beginning of something Walsh had not felt toward another man in a very long time: respect. Tony's phone lit up 40 minutes later. "Susan." "He wants to see you again," she said. Tony exhaled slowly against the steering wheel. "I know," he said. "So do I." The line went silent for just a beat too long. Then Susan said something in a voice so low he almost missed it. "Tony, be careful with him. Not he's grateful, not he wants to thank you. Be careful with him." "What aren't you telling me?" he said. The line was already dead.
It started with a photograph. Tony hadn't even known it was taken. 40 seconds outside the Walsh estate's side entrance. Someone had been waiting with a long lens for considerably longer than that. By the time Tony reached his first fare the next morning, the image was already moving. By lunchtime, it had a headline. By evening, it had several, each one worse, each one more certain, each one written by someone who had never spoken a word to him. Walsh Harris and mystery driver, love story or long game. Taxi driver who rescued Susan Walsh, what he's really after. A former passenger gave an interview. Tony had apparently made disparaging comments about wealthy clients 18 months ago. Tony had no memory of this person. It didn't matter. The story needed texture, and this man had provided it. And now it existed, permanent, indexed, 3 clicks from anyone who searched Tony's name. Then the message arrived. Blocked number, 11 words. Walk away from the Walsh girl or your mother's landlord gets a call. Tony read it 3 times. He thought about Gloria. 2 jobs, 61 years old. The way she said, "Don't worry, you eat," and meant every word of it. He put his phone in his pocket. He did not walk away. The car came from a side street on a Wednesday night. No warning, no horn, just headlights, sudden and enormous in his mirror, and then the impact. The sound was not the crash sound from films. It was metallic and intimate and wrong, the sound of something being permanently bent. His cab rotated across the wet road in a slow, terrible arc, and the curb came up, and there was nothing to do but hold the wheel and wait. The windscreen held, the door did not. He sat in the collapsed geometry of the driver's side and took one breath and then another, cataloging the damage by what each breath cost him. Left ribs, something wrong there. Not broken, but wrong. The smell of oil on hot metal reached him slowly, patient, acrid, the smell of a machine that had taken the hit meant for the man inside it. He looked in the mirror. The other car was already gone. Of course it was. For 6 days, Tony heard nothing from Walsh. He moved Gloria out of her flat without telling anyone where they were going. He drove her to work each morning and waited in the car park until his shift ended. He slept on a sofa with his phone face up beside him, waking at every sound. Not afraid for himself anymore. That had passed. He was afraid for Gloria, and that fear had no limit. On the 6th day, Walsh called, directly, his voice stripped back, the voice underneath the voice. "I need you to trust me for 48 hours, Walsh said. Tony was quiet for a moment. "You've given me very little reason to," he said. "I know," Walsh said, a pause that carried real weight. "I'm giving you one now." The event was held in the city's largest press venue, 500 people,
cameras on every wall. The men who had orchestrated every article, every threat, every blocked number sat near the front with the careful composure of people who did not yet know what was coming. Walsh took the stage and began at the beginning, the night Susan collapsed, the empty street, the taxi driver who caught her. He told it plainly, without embellishment, which made it more devastating than any embellishment could have, because the plain truth of it was already extraordinary, and everyone in the room could feel that. Then Walsh turned to the men near the front. He named them, one by one, calmly, with documentation appearing on the screens behind him as he spoke, messages, transactions, the full paperwork of a campaign to destroy a man who had done nothing except catch someone who was fallen. The room went very still. The men near the front stopped looking composed. Walsh did not raise his voice once. When he finished with them, he let the silence sit, long enough for the room to understand that the silence itself was a verdict. Then he turned toward the side of the stage where Tony was standing beside Susan. His expression changed into something Tony had not seen on him before, something unguarded. I have spent my life building things that last. I have poured concrete and signed contracts and shaken hands in rooms where everything had a price and everyone knew it. He paused. I have never once in 40 years of that life seen a man do what this man did, not for strategy, not for reward, not for anything except the fact that someone needed catching and his hands were open. I have a company. I have a name. I have a building with my name on it that you can see from the highway. He stopped, looked directly at Tony. None of it has ever made me proud the way this man makes me proud. He did not perform the next words. He simply said them. Tony is not my employee. He is not my project. He is not a story I am telling to make myself look generous. A breath. He is my son, and if any of you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me directly. He let that land, then quieter, almost to himself. I have spent 40 years learning to read men. I have been wrong before. I have trusted people who took everything I gave them and handed me a bill. He looked at Tony one more time. I have never in my life been more certain of anything than I am of him. The room did not applaud immediately. It took a moment, the way it takes a moment when something real has been said in a room accustomed to performance, and then it started, and it did not stop for a long time. Tony looked at his hands, the same hands that had been empty on a wet street, the same hands that had come up without being told to. He felt Gloria before he saw her, her small, steady hand finding his arm from behind, her voice close to his ear, barely above a breath. "Your father would have loved this," she said. Tony could not speak. He nodded once. That was all he had. They gave him a room backstage afterward. Water. Quiet. Susan found him sitting alone, jacket off, forearms on his knees, staring at the floor the way he had stared at the hospital floor on the night of the plastic chair. She sat beside him, close, their shoulders touching. "You went quiet," she said. "I know. What are you thinking?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I'm thinking about a boy who scored highest in his district," he said, "who stood in a corridor holding a piece of paper, who thought that was the moment the door was going to open." He looked at his hands. "I spent 13 years after that being angry at the door." Susan said nothing. "I don't think I knew until tonight that the door was never the point," he said. "You were the point. My mom was the point. That plastic chair was the point." He exhaled slowly. None of it was a mistake, not a single day of it. Susan looked at him for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "Tony, will you marry me?" He looked at her. "I was supposed to ask you that," he said. "I know," she said, "but I've been waiting for the right moment since the hospital, and I'm done waiting." He looked at her, this woman who had fallen into his arms on a street that should have meant nothing, who had listened to him talk about Gloria with her whole face, who had sent him a suit with a note that said please and meant it. "Yes," he said, without thinking, without calculation, just yes.
The neighborhood wedding happened on a Saturday. Not in a venue, on the actual street Tony had walked every morning with his cab keys. The corner shop owner who had always let him pay a day late was in the front row in a tie that didn't match his shirt. He was crying before the ceremony started, and he did not care who saw. The neighbors filled both pavements. Someone had hung warm yellow lights between the lamp posts. Gloria stood at the front in a dress Tony had never seen before and wept from the moment Susan appeared at the end of the road. Walsh stood 3 rows back, not at the front. He had placed himself there deliberately. This was not his street, not his world, not his moment to own. He stood in the row that belonged to a guest and watched the son he had found late and did not try to hold back what showed on his face. Tony stood at the end of the street and watched Susan walk toward him through the warm yellow light and thought about rain and an empty doorway and a decision that had not been a decision at all. She reached him. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi," he said. Behind them, the street filled with sound, applause and laughter, and someone's grandmother crying loudly and without apology, and Tony stood in the middle of it and felt for the first time in 31 years precisely where he was supposed to be. The city ceremony came 3 weeks later, the room, the cameras, the world. Tony stood through it with his hand in Susan's and felt simultaneously that it was happening to him and that it had always been going to happen.
The final image is not the wedding. It is a Sunday afternoon, 4 months later. A small porch on a small house on the street where Gloria raised him. Tony had bought it first, before anything else, before the foundation paperwork, before any of the rest of it. He had sat in Walsh's office, been shown numbers that still did not feel entirely real, and said very calmly, "I need to buy my mother's house first. Then we can talk about everything else." Walsh had looked at him, then nodded, then, for the first time in their entire acquaintance, smiled. Gloria is in the chair beside him now, cup of tea in both hands, watching the street the way she has watched every street her entire life, steadily, without complaint, with the patience of a woman who decided a very long time ago to outlast the world on her own terms. The afternoon light comes across the porch in long, flat lines. A child on a bicycle goes past. Somewhere down the road, someone is cooking something that smells like Sunday has always smelled, everywhere, in every city, in every life that has a Sunday in it. Tony looks at his hands, the same hands, loose at his sides on a wet street, coming up before he could stop 'em, paying a hospital deposit in coins, holding a plastic cup of tea from a nurse who did not have to be kind and chose to be anyway. He thinks about a boy in a school corridor, about a woman who said, "We'll find another way," about a door that never opened and the road he walked instead. All of it, every silent loss and every quiet endurance, and every night he swallowed something hard and kept driving. He does not regret a single day of it. Gloria reaches over without looking at him and puts her hand over his. She doesn't say anything. She already said everything she needed to say in a hospital room with her hands on his face, the way she had always said the things that mattered. Down the street,
Through the front window of the house, Tony can see Susan moving in the kitchen, unhurried, at home, belonging there with the same naturalness with which she had always, even from the beginning, belonged beside him. He caught her before he thought about it. Love works the same way.